a translator, but these other folks, they're like archaeologists, authors, and then they started to invite musicians and cooks as well that who promote our culture through food and music.
Wow. Okay.
That's amazing. Zacharias, we're live now, man. Just so the people know who you are, Zacharias from Hispanidad Translations.
Hi, thank you for having me, Adrian. I appreciate it. And you go by Adrian here, I'm assuming, right? We're good.
Yeah, man, we can hear you. We can hear you for sure. Hispanidad Translations. What is that platform dedicated to?
So basically, it's a translation. That's primarily what I do. I translate for Spanish spoken arguments and lessons, normally from Spanish to English, but also it could be in reverse, regarding Hispanic history. So the history of Spanish speakers, right, all throughout the world.
Nice. And I see sometimes you bring up things like laws, like literal laws that the Catholic Empire or the Spanish Empire would like, kind of like protecting the indigenous people and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of said it right too. You know, primarily they were Catholic, right? Being Catholic back in that time, like many places, but being Catholic in this legal system was, it's correct to say it's a Catholic empire. But yes, there's a lot of protections, laws that they established. The first laws that we see established here, it's deeply rooted. So yeah, being Catholic is like having your citizenship nowadays. You know, it's a certain standards you have to meet, and that's just one of the standards from that time period. And so sometimes we look upon it now and it seems a little archaic, but for that time period, it's extremely normal. In fact, it makes sense when you have a whole society based on an idea, right, or a belief system, right, and you know, this was a Renaissance. This was a golden age for the Spanish, or the Hispanics in general, Spanish speakers, right, because as I go into in my channel that the Spanish Empire is not like kind of what we consider to be just Spain now, and the rest of the world was just owned by it, right? No, like it didn't belong to Spain, right? These territories didn't just belong to Spain; they were Spain. They were additional provinces and capitanias of Spain. And so with these laws, the idea was to make individuals, native people, you know, explorers, all kinds of folks of different colors into citizens, right, ultimately. And in order to fortify the empire, it's actually one of the last classical models, classical empirical models that closely resembles the Roman Empire, which would do a similar thing where they incorporate a territory and make it additional realms, right? Which is why we call it Las Spaniards.
Right. And a lot of times we hear these phrases like imperialist, colonist, as something that's negative. And I think that's really why we wanted to have you on, right? Because I think a lot of times I've been hit up throughout my life as a Mexican American by different people, Indians, Mexicans, people that I think for the most part are they don't like Christianity, or the version.
They have a false idea of what that Christianity was like.
That's generally the case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we've been hit up about that plenty of times. You know what I mean? And as I've been diving into this Catholic history, I've been seeing maybe there's a different story from a different angle that to me started making a lot more sense. Now, before I came across your page, I already had a bias because I'm Mexican. I had a bias where I was like, well, you know what? I mean, the Mexican people, the natives in Mexico were probably crazy pagans that were murderous. So who cares what the Spanish did? And that was kind of my biased stance, right? But relearning that history, what was Mexico like before Spain arrived?
Oh yeah. Well, I think this is all great insight that you're giving me. Well, Mexico, first of all, let's be very clear. Mexico doesn't exist before the arrival of the Spanish. Like, well, what we know as Mexico is not Los Estados Unidos Mexicanos, right? All that territory did not belong to Mexico. There was no Mexico, right? You had that, like the Aztec Empire, which they call the Mexica Empire, which is where the word comes from, the Mexica, right? And then you had like the Mexico City, you have references by the chroniclers, the Spanish chroniclers as Mexicans, but it's simply referencing the Aztecs, right? What we know as the Aztecs, right? And some people debate the word Aztecs, but I'm going to use it in this context, right? So because we all can reference it well. And basically, yes, so there are some of what you said, your generalizations were somewhat right. There were a lot of, it was very hectic pre-Columbian. Well, pre-Columbian native world was extremely hectic, where you had stronger groups oppressing smaller groups. You even had, in some cases,
When you say pre-Columbian, are you talking about pre-Columbian like Christopher
before
Columbus?
the arrival, exactly. So the arrival of all the Europeans, all the Spanish, right? You have societies, right, and civilizations, right? And so the Aztec Empire is one of many. And so Mexico is not just Aztec. And I think that's where some of this, I would say, nationalism gets a little confused. You have some, especially with us Mexican Americans, we're very proud, right, to come from Mexico. And I used to be extremely proud, like, Arriba Mexico, cabrones. I was all about that. But it was fun. It was fun. But like, you start to realize that, first of all, like, this concept of Mexico is it's not real. Like, when you're talking about the pre-Columbian societies, a lot of what is Mexico now made up of various nations and tribes, right? Of different types of Native Americans, and they had different languages, different customs. They didn't like each other a lot of times. So there's, you have like the Aztec Empire is obviously not just one of the most powerful ones in what is now Mexico, but probably one of the most powerful ones in all of the continents, right, of the Americas, right, south and north, right. Peru having the Incas as well. But I think to chalk it up, to think of Mexico in that light is it's just wrong. It's off, right? But anyways, to go on to understanding the situation a little better, when you want to talk about the conquest, right? Because a lot of times we're thinking of Spain as being an oppressor, like a colonizer, right? Like your friend said there. But in colonizer, imperialist, right? And we see things like activists online. There's like, decolonize this, decolonize that, decolonize your way of thinking. Stop being so Eurocentric all the time,
Right.
But no, these are just charged words that they don't really understand what they're saying. Decolonizing, what do you mean? Like, you can be the first to get off your phone and maybe go live in a wood or something, So like, right. I'm just saying, like, we are the product of these colonization, right? But to be fair, legally speaking, colonization is not the legal term correct for the Spanish Empire, because what this is a composite monarch, meaning you have a monarchy in charge of other monarchies, right? So you have like the viceroy, underneath, and each viceroy was in charge of different territories in Hispanic America and in Europe as well. Like, don't think it was just like on the natives that this was happening to. Like, when Spain conquered different areas, either through delegating, right, diplomacy, or through just conquest, which was absolutely normal for the time of all societies, regardless of race. But you had, like, southern Italy was Spain. In fact, the viceroyalty of Sicily is extremely old. If you think about Italy now, the country Italy didn't exist until 1863. Yet the viceroyalty has a longer existence. The viceroyalty of Sicily has a longer existence with Spain, right, with the peninsula there, than it has currently been a country. And the same thing for Mexico. Mexico was the viceroyalty of New Spain, right? It was the New Spain, right? Not a lesser Spain, a New Spain. And what that carries more years in existence than the current country of Mexico. And so that's something to consider, because a lot of the things that we love about our culture, that we love about being Mexican, it comes from this time period. I would say most of it does, but this 300 years gets overlooked. You're talking like 1521 to like 1821, right? 300 years, right? And how little we told about it. We're just told about there was genocide, there was caste systems, but like nobody really dives into the history. So that's what got me compelled to begin translating a lot of the information that's in Spanish that hardly exists in English, right? It's surprising me, with all these great historians out there, how come they could miss so much of this? And I'll get into this a little bit later, but a big cause of this is because of the Spanish Black Legend, which is a real academic phenomenon of how Hispanic history gets lied about on an academic level. And so it's completely studied, written by people who are not Spanish as well, written by people like Philip Powell, people all over the world that have written about the Spanish Black Legend. And so, yes, and to go on further about being Catholic, right? This Black legend doesn't begin necessarily with the Protestant Reformation, but it explodes in the Protestant Reformation. And so when you have political interests to divide Catholic empires throughout Europe, and when the printing presses become extremely popular in this time period, they start to submit propaganda that goes broadcast throughout the world. So
And
this is a
do you,
lot of history that we've been introduced to, right? As English speakers, especially in the English, the globalization of English throughout the world. This is the side of history that we're listening to, a very WASP history here.
wow.
What do you mean by? Did you say WASP?
Yeah, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Okay.
So
Wow. I haven't heard many people use that in context, honestly.
yeah, and no knock on my my white people. Like it's not they didn't do it. But I'm just saying this is the reason why our history has been distorted because of political rivalries, right? Cultural and religious rivalries. Because these were not cold wars; they were hot wars.
Right. And to me, it sounds more religious than anything. I mean, through my lens, I also have that bias, right? Where as somebody that's Catholic and religious, I'm thinking, well, shoot, they're attacking the history of this Catholic nation, and that's really why we have the Black legend or the different stories within that legend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing too. I'm going to get into the independences a little bit later.
Okay.
But it's good to be. How do I say this? The Protestant Reformation hurts Christianity, right? It hurts Christianity because, let's just say I'm not even a Christian. Let's say I'm not a Catholic. Let's just look at it from an outside perspective. You're looking at like you're an alien. But what you see a group of people who all of a sudden split into many different groups and no longer agree on fundamental issues. And this hurts not just individual communities who make them weaker and more vulnerable, right? How can like the Jehovah's Witness even compare to the Catholic Church, right? They're one little sect, and there's so many of them. Everyone's divided into their own interpretation. And so it hurts Christianity as a whole. It hurts the West as a whole too. I would say the Spanish Empire is kind of similar like that. When the independences occurred, you split the Catholic Spanish monarchy into many different states, into many different republics. And in doing so, you hurt our Hispanicity, you hurt our people were one people for over 300 years. And so that's kind of what we're left with in this moment where Hispanic America is not in ruins or impoverished because of the conquest. Though you'll see a lot of these bigger cities, a lot of these areas in Hispanic America had great hospitals, they had proto-industries, they had bigger cities, more important cities, sometimes with even better wages. Even the mine workers were making better wages in the late 1700s. And some of these cities like Mexico City was comparable to London and Paris, I mean. And they were even more important than the United States at many different points before these countries got into independence wars, which were actually civil wars over interest by individuals who wanted to run these territories because of a discontent that they had when France invaded Spain in that time period. When Napoleon started to enter Spain and started to have friendships with the king at that time. So yes, this is a lot of we see kind of a rise of the economy, a rise of cultural and political and societal wealth up until the independences throughout the Americas, and they all look a little different too, right? Like but generally, a lot of these countries have attached onto the Spanish Black legend to justify their existence today. So you'll hear a lot of political leaders in Hispanic America almost behave like sensationalist Protestants, how they talk about Spain. Like Spain was the devil's whore, Spain was this and that, acting crazy. And it's like, there's no real, but if you think about it, we carry some of the most potential throughout the world. There's 600 million Spanish speakers throughout the world. We're one of the biggest native language speakers in the world. In the United States, we have over 50 million Spanish speakers. in the United States, that's even more than Spain has of a population. We have, and don't get the numbers aren't exact, but we do have more Spanish speakers here than Spain does. But Mexico being the first, obviously. But imagine all this power, and that's constantly what I'm trying to tell people with this message, right? Imagine our cultural power, right? And again, even as Americans, we may not, I'm an American citizen, I'm born here, but I'm Hispanic. I'm a Hispanic American, right? And I don't necessarily have to have a gripe or hatred to my own country, my own home. This is my home. I'm not going to be a terrorist, right? But I have every right in the world to promote my religion, my culture, right?
I think we're. Can you hear me, brother?
I can hear you. Did I break up like all throughout all that or what?
Yeah,
not throughout the whole thing, just literally like the last 40 seconds.
Yeah.
But
the last 40 seconds. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, kind of to bring it back to so Mexico pre-Spain wasn't Mexico as we know it. It wasn't a bunch of United States of Mexico.
What did that look like? Was there different regions, tribes? Like, what did that look like?
Oh yeah, it's so different. Well, you have the tribes and like the nations in Mesoamerica, right? They had a lot of. They were interesting because they had a lot of I would say like political advancements, right? More so than maybe like the natives over here in California, right? The natives in California were very nomadic, a lot less, I would say like advanced politically and with technology. But it's interesting because when the Spaniards arrived, you have to remember that it's a minority of Spaniards. The group of men, and there are women too that are coming in this time, right? Because I think the idea that conquistadors were strictly only men, or there's some kind of barbarians, that's not true. They have women. They even have slaves and children, and you even have some of the first black conquistadors. Who in that time when you're going through all these conquests, the terrain is extremely rough and harsh, and people have to survive. So they're relying on one another despite their whatever place they are in their society, and they end up becoming rich in the process, or they end up becoming honored in the process. Like we have women conquistadores too, right? We even have, and that's why we have eventually what happens is native. Can you hear me still?
Oh yeah.
You have native conquistadores, which is what happens, right? Because they're a minority, they do have ambitions though, right? Like Hernan Cortes or all these other conquistadors who are very famous now, who eventually established the different cities in Mexico now, right? But they eventually they ally with a lot of native nations like the Tlaxcalans, who ends up becoming a great ally, and they were actually fighting them at first until they came to agreements, and which goes to show, a group of people like this, that they weren't all just trying to viciously murder all the natives they can find. And honestly, like they really couldn't if they tried, because they're in many desperate need of many natives. You have individuals like Doña Marina, who's wrongly called La Malinche, right? And you have even after the conquest of Tenochtitlan, what happens is what makes New Spain, what is now Mexico, are the conquests that happen afterward too. So the fall of Tenochtitlan is just one of the bigger ones, right? The moment. But like after that, you have the wars, the Chichimeca Wars, right? Which is often in reference by indigenistas, like native activists. They use it as a way to see the native person rebelling against the white Spaniard. When in reality, a lot of these Spanish armies and battalions were full of Native Americans. And one of the big allies in those wars were the Otomi. And you even have a general, you have a native general that comes out in that time who ends up cutting off the ears of Spanish riflemen, because the social stratum of the individual was more powerful regardless of your color of skin. So we have some of them first elites and nobles come out of these conquests who are rewarded by the king as well. They're given coat of arms for their houses, just like the houses in Europe as well. And in the conquest of the Peru, with Francisco Pizarro, he also relied on the many Incans who were discontent with other political leaders, and they fought side by side. In fact, in archaeological studies, they found in the remains of these conquests that many of the remains have been cut open, right, by other native weaponry. Not by all muskets and Spanish metal. Right? So it just, and these are the beginning steps of our mestizaje, right? A lot of us, none of us are really pure-blooded or anything. And I think that's kind of the confusion of my work, right? Because it's a Spanish history, because I have to know this history, that sometimes people can confuse by the word Hispanic. They assume it means Spanish-blooded, right? Or Spanish, a focus on Spanish people, right? In reality, it's not that at all. Being Hispanic is cultural. It's something we're raised into, right? It's something that some of us do have mixed blood with Spanish people, but even people who may not have any at all, they've been living in this environment for 500 plus years, right? And they've been eating the cattle from the Spaniards, all the food and the industry that's been brought here. It's all Hispanic, right? And that's part of the work, is revealing what is Hispanic influenced, right? But no, back to like the conquest of what is now Mexico. You had many different types of natives and many different types of conquest, and some were more intense than others, right? And some natives were more intense than others too. Some would attack innocent people, and some were just kind of just wander by. But yes, and that kind of leads into like Catholicism.
And that sounds like a dramatically different story than we were told, right? I mean, if the natives are these different tribes are fighting alongside the Spaniards, and we also, I heard you say black conquistadors, and I think I seen a post from you.
Native conquistadors too, like
that's a completely different story than we were told. We have literally. That's like, it's almost like the opposite of we were told, you know what I mean? So I think that's really interesting, brother. But you said you were going to connect it to Catholicism. How is that?
Oh, well, obviously, as you know, Catholicism is like a must in this empire. And so people like to use the natives were forced into Catholicism, right? That's the kind of, I'll say, generalized falsification of the spiritual conversion of the Hispanoamerica. It's because, first of all, we have to be very straightforward, right? Very honest, that forced conversions, whether they happened or not, right? Let's be honest, like, it's illegal. It's illegal for the Catholic Church. It's like a marriage. You cannot just be forced into marriage. Yeah, exactly. And it's been something that's been frowned upon just for a long time, since the start. And so people don't understand that the legality, the illicitness of forcing people into conversions, right? But for example, and that's why the Spanish Inquisition they were looking for false converts. The Spanish Inquisition wasn't looking just for Jewish people or Muslim people. No, they were looking for false converts who were supposed to have converted, but were practicing another religion, which is seen as treason in the society, right? And instead of leaving it to mob justice, they had a full inquisition, a full investigation to see if it was correct or not. And which is something to get into a little bit later down the line too, about the tribunal being actually one of the most lenient tribunals in all of Europe at that time. In fact, some of the first to provide some of the more, I would say, modern steps of empirical evidence. So anyways, but I'll get back to that. But Catholicism in Hispanic America, as I said, it's becoming Hispanicized, becoming part of this new Spanish empire. One has to baptize. One has to be baptized. So, whether people want to flaunt that as forced conversion is a bit of a stretch. And so, yeah, that's just the times. Just like people were forced into being sacrificed, by the Aztecs, or forced to be eaten by other people, or some people were forced to have polygamy with or like La Malinche, Doña Marina, La Malinche, Doña Marina was forced into slavery by other natives, because let's not forget that slavery and all these and injustices did occur before the arrival of the Spanish. It's not like they introduced it to them. This stuff had been happening already, human trafficking, wars, all that. So
you didn't know that slavery was invented by the Spaniards?
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh. Some people really watch. They're gonna watch this and like, well, no, what are you talking about? How could you say this? They're gonna be so stunned. It's so funny. But no. But anyways, as I said, but Catholicism. So you have in fact, I think here's where it gets interesting, right, with Catholicism. there have become many laws to end up prohibiting the forced conversion of Catholicism on Native Americans. And these are part of what you call laws of the Indies, las leyes de las Indias. And that's kind of what you referenced earlier. So you have like the law, a decree from King Carlos I of Spain, also known as the Fifth of Germany, who ends up becoming having one of the greatest sovereignties in the world. But he ends up announcing that Native people must not be warred upon in order to bring them the Catholic faith. And this is a decree from 1528. It's extremely ancient, extremely old. But it's something that needed to be said, obviously. Because probably maybe they had complaints, right? But the idea though is that was, I would say, generally the idea that laws reflect society's values, and this is what we see many laws coming out because this is what the society valued. Free will conversion. And they actually do if you think about it, a very impressive job, these missionaries that go to the Americas. And a lot of these names they're just left behind. It's interesting how much generalization happens, but a lot of these great people end up getting left behind in this great history too. Great pioneers of different types. And so, yes, like you have the 12 apostles, what they call, after the fall of Tenochtitlan, Hernan Cortes calls for more Franciscans to come to evangelize because they need more. They had, I don't know if you know about Padre Olmedo, but he was like one of the only ones available, for thousands of people. So it's like, it was extremely hard, to try to teach everybody and try to be a holy figure for everybody, And so these 12 apostles came, and you have some pretty amazing people that come along with them. You just have a complex web of different types of people. You have some incredible people. You have some people kind of lower. You just have a bit of everything. But that's what makes life exciting, right? That's what makes our history so interesting, so fascinating, right? But it's interesting that I just call that we don't live with complexes, because I know these indigenistas, they're not living with complexes when it comes to their, Aztec, when they're talking about their Aztec ancestry, which are probably not of Aztec origin, they're probably some other native tribe, but they're talking about how they, they were the greatest warriors cutting into everybody. It's like, well, like all of a sudden you have no problem being like some kind of predator, right? But if I were to say the same thing about being honored about Hernan Cortes and all the Spanish, they'd have a whole different tune. They'd probably cry about it. But anyways, going back to these different figures, right? You have people like Bartolomé de las Casas, right? You have people like, Bartolomé de las Casas, have you ever heard of him before? And I've talked about him lots of times. So Bartolomé de las Casas, you're going to hear about him. You're going to hear Bartolomé de las Casas. He's a Dominican friar who participates in these debates about the treatment of Native Americans, which sounds pretty good because he's out there trying to defend them, right? However, he ends up saying that millions and millions of people died because of the Spanish, and he's trying to take recordings from people who he wasn't even in these events, but he's taking it from other people, and he's looking for crimes against humanity, right? And he's trying to bring it up to the king. He's trying to bring it up to the people in the peninsula, right, in the Spanish peninsula, to the elites out there, saying this is what the conquistadors have been doing, right? And the encomenderos too, But in reality, you start to see that, first of all, a lot of what he said is absolutely embellished and it's contradictory. And so some say it comes from a good intention, that he's trying to defend people, because I'm sure he did witness some things, and I'm sure there were things that happened, right? But to what scale did this happen? That's the real question. But he said, he even contradicted in his Brevissima, it's called. The Brevissima is his main text where he talks about all these people being tortured and murdered, millions, right? Mind you, nobody's counting millions. Like there is no census until like hundreds of years later. So he's out here just kind of guesstimating. And so what happens is that a lot of these texts, the Protestants grab the text and they start to translate into their own languages, and they start to point the finger. And a lot of this is what fans the flames for the Black legend. And so a lot of the things you'll see, different types of artwork that comes out of Europe from like Theodore de Bry, they look like European people who are being tortured and named and eaten by dogs and stuff because they've never seen a Native American in their life. And so basically they're just using what Bartolomé de las Casas described. And however, you even have one of those 12 apóstoles, a man named Fray Toribio de Benavente, and the natives called him Motolonia, which means poor. And he lived among the natives. He had a stronger relationship with Native Americans. It was like Bartolomé de las Casas, he never even learned a native language. And Bartolomé, and so Toribio de Benavente calls out Bartolomé de las Casas, and he says, the things that this guy's been writing, he writes a letter to the emperor, to Charles I, you know? He says, this guy's, he's been slandering, he's exaggerating, this is gonna hurt us. The things he's talking about things he's never even witnessed before in his life. I don't even know how you folks can stand this man. And mind you, this man is a man of humility, the man that loved the natives loved him. And he's talking about this slanderer, Bartolomé de las Casas, and which we have now seen that many of his things contradict. A lot of things he said have contradicted. Now that we're in modern times, Bartolomé de las Casas he's been debunked, and even by people who don't even like the Spanish Empire.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is how did we come to find out that he was contradicting himself, or that? Mm-hmm. And also, have we ever gotten anything that would suggest any intentions? Like, why was he so adamant of pushing that?
Well, so for Toribio de Benavente, what he says in his complaints to the emperor is that this man thinks he's like holier than thou. He's got this he calls him a mercenary. That's what he calls him. He calls him a mercenary. He says that he's trying to seem like a saint, seem holier than everyone else, right? But he lives and he just writes on his own constantly. He's constantly just writing. And that's what his complaints are in the letter. He says, this guy, all he does is write. And he even just talked about Bartolomé de las Casas, how he rejected a man from getting a sacrament one time when he's supposed to be doing his missionary duties. He's complaining. He says, this man doesn't even do any of his missionary duties. Like, he's not out there working and he's not helping. He's just writing all the time. And then he's becoming bishop of Veracruz or Oaxaca or Chiapas. I think he became bishop of Chiapas, and he became bishop of Chiapas. You guys didn't even like check in. Like, he doesn't even do any of the stuff that we're doing out here. He's not living with everybody. So like, there's a lot of reasons why he would do that. But secondly, the contradictions that come out too are his numbers. He presents one set of numbers, and he presents 3 different numbers of the millions and millions of people who died throughout his Brevísima. So obviously he didn't care about the amount of people, the figures he presented. He was trying to provide an argument. And so he participates in the Valladolid debates, which, you know, which end up kind of becoming like a staple in how we see, and like, if you ask anybody, right, about historians, about this history, right, and even people who may know a little bit, like the English speakers, they always know about the Valladolid debates. They always know about Bartolomé de las Casas. And the indigenistas, the activists, native activists, always know about Bartolomé de las Casas. They don't know anything about much else. Outside of that, they know very little. And you start to see that there's many complexities. As I said, just like Bartolomé de las Casas is a complex figure, just like Toribio Benavente is there, he's got this complexity. He's discussing these complaints against him, and he's against them. Well, Bartolomé de las Casas, number one, he never even mentioned any names in the book. If you have an accuser, well, you're going to want to know what happened, who did it, what name, what can you provide a name, can you help us, or can you give a witness? Like, he provides no names of who's accused of guilty or nothing. While Toribio de Benavente is out here providing names, you know, also defending Native people. So, you know, you just have you just see the complexities here. You got to see the picture. You can't just read one thing and then assume it's everything, right? And so when you have people like Hernan Cortes is a good example too, of the complexity of this time and the complexity of conquistadores, that they weren't all out, they weren't just genocidal maniacs looking to kill all the natives. No, well, you begin to realize that he obviously is friends with these natives. He ends up becoming allies with these natives. He ends up working with these natives, and they end up accomplishing great feats, dangerous feats at that, but still with the natives, right? The natives were active participants in the major conquest of the Spanish Empire. You know, you have Tlaxcalans going all over the place helping out. And so Hernan Cortes ends up establishing the first hospital in what is now Hispanic America, in the mainlands, right? And that's, was that? I want to say it's 1523. So maybe 2 years after the conquest of Tenochtitlan. And what? This is for Native people, you know, because that's the greater population. He also was practicing quarantining people who were getting sick. These aren't actions from someone who hates Native people. So he's also there constructing at times when they have to build different materials to go to war. He's out there. He's not just demanding it happen. He's getting down and he's doing it himself, according to chronicles of other people, like Bernal Diaz de la Castillo, right? So you have all these witnesses. And so you have all of these things happening. And to generalize that it's just white bad people versus brown poor innocent people it's off. It's just wrong. And so basically, the Catholic narrative gets kind of lost in all that too. And honestly, it's kind of a lazy accusation just to be against Catholicism today, right? That's literally what it is. It's lazy because let's be honest. In the same time period, you have Protestants killing way more people in Europe than the Spanish Inquisition. In Germany, for example, compared to Spain, 25,000 witches are burned in that same time period, while the Spanish Inquisition killed within 3 or 5,000 people in 300 years. Think about that: 5,000 people being the most. The Spanish Inquisition, the boogeyman that tortured and killed everybody. And then you go and behold, and you go to these museums, you'll see all kinds of crazy anecdotes. You'll see all kinds of crazy weapons and tools to torture. Come to find out, none of these were in the Spanish Inquisition. Why are they in these museums? And everyone's fine with it. I'm sorry.
Are you talking about museums in Mexico?
No, Spain.
In Mexico, in Spain, even in Peru, and there's not many courts. I mean, think about it, like official courts of the Spanish Inquisition. They're really only a select few right throughout Hispanic America because it had very little activity in Hispanic America. Most of the Spanish Inquisition's activity was in Europe, where the religious wars were happening with Protestants mostly,
Right.
and we're more falsos conversos. We're
This is like around the
well,
time.
exactly around the time of the Reformation, a little bit before too, But like that's what I'm saying. That's many of these religious wars are happening during this time, and a lot of that's when the Spanish Inquisition has more activity. And so, in Hispanic America, I don't know if people even know this, but the Spanish Inquisition was prohibited. It came to a point where it prohibited judging Native people, sentencing Native people. And there was so much so that some mestizo people would end up in the Inquisition, and they say, "Look, I'm Native American," which is kind of true, and just so they would get out of the Spanish Inquisition. And it's ironically, when we have people in facing the civil charges, a lot of them wanted to go to the Spanish Inquisition, and they would blaspheme so that way they can go to the Spanish Inquisition jails because they were better kept and they were safer than the civil ones.
Yeah.
So you see different events like this happen, incidents like this happen, and you start to realize that the Spanish Inquisition isn't quite the boogeyman that it's in the movies. And a lot, as I said before, the torture chambers, the torture that happens in these museums, they're all fake. There was only 3 types of torture and torture rarely even happened. And there was
I was gonna say in one of your Instagram reels, you had posted that a lot of the torture devices were actually like fabricated years after the Inquisition, yes. Right?
Many came in like the 19th century, so that'd be the 1800s. And to have that type of metal for just torture, it's kind of ridiculous because metal is extremely valuable, right? To have from so much equipment. So yeah, you see a lot of it's like romanticized, right? Dark. Certain romanticism here, right? And it's created like the Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is one of them, right, from Germany. It's just you have all kinds of random ones like the breast stripper or the pear. There's so many. They're so fake. It's interesting, and it's funny because museums will still have them. Some museums are pretty descarado, right? They're shameless and they won't even mention anything. They know it's fake, but they'll just because you make money. So think of these museums. It's an amusement park.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's like an amusement park. It's like going to scary, like a scary attraction, right? And so that's what it is. And you got to think of it that way, because then a lot of people come out of it confused. A lot of Catholics do. A lot of enemies of Catholicism, anti-Catholics, come out super zealous and thinking that this is what happened, and it's not. It wasn't like that at all, actually.
Yeah. And so I've been reading this book called Conquest of Darkness of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Uh-huh. Have you ever come across it?
The book?
Yes.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Maybe I'll send you something in the chat here, or after the stream. But it's a really good book. I think it's the William Carroll. I think it's his name.
Let's see, Conquest of
from Christendom Universities. I know he's Catholic.
Warren Carroll.
Warren Carroll.
Yeah.
Yes. So so what I've read in that, by the way, I would recommend reading it just because I'm blown back by the way he was able to capture the moments before Spain arrived in Mexico and the 70,000 people roughly that were sacrificed to these gods. And I read it, and it's like the Spaniards arriving to this region of the world was a blessing to the native people, and I think that we can still see that evidence here today. You go to Guadalajara, Guanajuato, name it. These places are beautiful. Their infrastructure is beautiful, and it's all Spanish infrastructure. So to me, it didn't make sense when I was hearing the version of history they were telling me, and then I'm seeing this country, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, it didn't make sense until I came across content like yours, you know?
Yeah.
What were you gonna say something, Modesto?
Modesto was gonna say something.
I forgot. Yeah, go ahead. I forgot.
Oh yeah, you're right though. But I love it. I'm so glad you got to experience it. That's awesome, man. Yeah. But as you said, like a lot of the infrastructure, right? It comes from that time period. You have so many cities and so many hospitals being built in this time period.
I think I had seen something on your page that there are still hospitals in Mexico that the Spanish Empire built, right? Like they're still in operation today, right? And university.
That one from Hernan Cortes is still in operation in Mexico City.
And like you kind of see the contrast of the treatment of the natives on part of the Spanish Empire versus like these Protestant nations, like especially here in the U.S., right? Like I remember seeing some content about that.
And the reason why I bring up the book Zacharias is because it's very religious, and the moments that happened from Mexico turning into this land that's dedicated to sacrificing humans to these snake and sun gods and all these little different things. And then the Spaniards come, and then the Spaniards are obviously on a journey, new land, new people. They have the truth, they have the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And they're sending in the friars, and they're trying the best they can, obviously, with the circumstances that they're in. But then you have Our Lady of Guadalupe show up and kind of shift that. What year was that around, and what difference did that make?
Yeah, that's a good question, because somebody just asked in our chat if around this time, and maybe around when the apparition of the Virgen de Guadalupe, if like a lot of the pagan sacrifices you hear about, was that going on around that same time? That was something that somebody had asked.
Oh yeah, it's big. That's a big event. Well, according to it's 1531. You probably all know that 1531 is when the apparitions occurred with Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it does have a big effect. A lot of the early texts, they talk about how the natives are flocking to the image. Some maybe a little too much, you know. Some people get nervous, like, I don't know about that, you know. But that kind of is a healthy skepticism that the Catholic Church has always had, you know. And it's good, you know. But you know, doesn't debunk it, but because some priests were nervous about it, but it shows that we have a wide range of believers in our institution, right? And so, but yeah, no, like Our Lady of Guadalupe is huge. And I don't know if you know, but like to reference Guadalupe is a big deal, because the Our Lady of Guadalupe is the Virgin Mary, obviously, right? It's not Tonancin, right? And so, which looks completely different if you see the sculpture of her. It's like, as you said, it's like a snake, and you know, it's got this, you know, body parts, a collar, totally different look. But which tries to be appropriated by certain activists as being, you know, Tonancin, but it's actually Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is actually reference to the Spanish Our Lady of Guadalupe, that where Hernan Cortes is from, and all the main conquistadores are from Extremadura. It's a province in Spain, and that's where Our Lady of Guadalupe, happened, where the Virgin Mary visited a pastor over there, and they have a big basilica there from before, I want to say the 1300s.
So
the same apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe also appeared in Spain, you're saying, or
it's a Virgin Mary, yes, but she came to yes, she went to Spain, and and it was called Guadalupe, right? It's the area, and that's how the name was adopted, and it became a big, it became a big, a big deal, because in this area they had been for many generations they had been hiding from Muslims, and there was a sculpture that was hidden for a long time in the soil, and this pastor found it and he took it out, and now there's the little statues over in Spain in Extremadura, Our Lady of Guadalupe it's called. And so to reference Our Lady of Guadalupe, for the Virgin Mary to come to the Juan Diego and say, I am Our Lady of Guadalupe, that's completely direct. I am the mother of I'm the mother of Jesus Christ from the Spanish that they brought, but I'm that woman. And that's a big deal. And it connects our Hispanicity. It connects us to our different Spanish speakers throughout the world. Our Lady of Guadalupe is super important.
So her presenting herself as Our Lady of Guadalupe, automatically the Spaniards knew, well, Our Lady of Guadalupe, there was already an apparition in Spain.
Oh yeah, and the natives too, because they had been talking about it. Imagine they're bringing the conquistadors are coming from this particular area. Francisco Pizarro and Cortes, they're coming from Extremadura, not just any part of Spain. And the specific part, it's very dry. It kind of looks like Mexico, right? It's like they brought a lot of that look to what is now Mexico. And so they had been presenting Jesus Christ, they're presenting the Virgin Mary, discussing Our Lady of Guadalupe. They had a strong devotion. I want to say that's where Christopher Columbus met with Queen Isabel, La Católica, to begin his expeditions. I want to say, you can double check that.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So there's a shift, and you're saying the shift is so strong that it's even something that the church was skeptical, careful with, especially because the way that the natives flocked to the image. But aside from that, how you say this? Like I'm trying to imagine like basically the masses consensus shifts and human sacrifices stop.
Well, they stopped. They kind of generally had to stop after the fall, because the fall of Tenochtitlan happened in 1521, and then the Virgin Mary came in 1531. So that's like 10 years. And so the part of the Spanish, obviously, they had to teach the natives, and it's interesting because there's an idea that the Spanish people automatically saw all the natives as less human, right? There's this idea that they didn't. That's not really the case here, right? Because you have a lot of Native Americans who they ally with and becomes friends with. Obviously, they knew they're human. If they didn't know they're human, they wouldn't even begin to baptize or try to baptize all of them, right? They have souls, right? Why put in the work? And so, no, they do see they're human. They're communicating with them. They're learning each other's languages, right? And here's where it gets interesting is that, early on, the Tlaxcalans, their allies that they're hanging out with and they're preparing to fight the Aztec Empire with, the Tlaxcalans, Bernal Diaz del Castillo in his chronicle, he writes how they were practicing cannibalism, right? Just like what is said that the Aztecs practice, A lot of people get really up in arms and they really want to push against that narrative that they were cannibals, but there's archaeological evidence that it was happening. There's chronicles that was happening of different types of groups of Europeans that saw it and witnessed it, and it wasn't just the Spanish, You had it in the Mexica codexes of people eating other people. It was just, even happens among people who are starving today, right? And so, but they witnessed that. They saw their own allies eating other people, and they kind of had to live with it at the moment. They couldn't just say, hey, cut that shit out. Like, they did say stop, like that's not okay. But when they're in the very first encounters, they had to kind of turn a blind eye to some of it, and it was very disturbing. And Bernal Diaz de Castillo literally said he had to look the other way while someone was eating person, right? And so and then there's also chronicles of Moctezuma eating the thigh of little boys, and anyways, but that's the point though, is that just because they did these grotesque things, they didn't just stop thinking they were human. They knew they were human. They just saw them as fallen human, right? People that were they needed to, and we have chronicles from missionary Juan de la Cosa. It was not Juan de la Costa. I'm sorry. It's Juan de la Costa. I'm gonna look into this, but I want to say it's a Jesuit missionary who talks about that individuals can learn through their environment, and they're not born that way, which is kind of contradictory to what eugenics teaches us, right? What comes later on in the like early 1900s, right, where you're seeing that people are judged according to the race to have a certain intellectual ability, right? But the Spanish were obviously trying to get them up to speed, which is a hard task, mind you, which is something that Protestant Americans came and they didn't have time for, and there was many initiatives and expeditions to just wipe out territories and inhabit it, right? So it's just kind of So anyways, to go back to that, like there were certain practices that were grotesque, but they weren't necessarily deemed as not human just because of it.
Damn.
Which is kind of contrary to like everything we're kind of raised to believe, kind of,
I have another one I need to add too. One more.
Yeah. Oh, please.
Oh, look at that! Hey, you see that? The little balloons. So I did this. The little balloons came out. But no, and that's just my goal right there, I guess. But like contrary to what you've been taught, right?
Right.
Contrary to what you've been taught. But guess what's another one that's very big too? Is the imposition of Spanish on native people. So there's this idea that Spanish was completely imposed on all the native people, right? Uniformly, right? In a general way.
The language Spanish. Okay.
Yeah, they were beaten, like the language is just like exterminated from them, right? Some cultural genocide, right? But in reality, like from early on, we have like King Philip II, who has a decree who says that native people should not be forced to abandon their language. They don't find it convenient to do so, but that they should provide teachers for those who are willing to learn it with the Catholic language. And so it's interesting because it really is contrary to what we're taught, because when you start to realize that a lot of these missionaries begin to publish the first grammars for the native languages all throughout the explored territories that didn't have one. And in fact, in 1492, Spain was the first country of that time, of the modern era, I would say, that published its first grammar, thanks to Nebrija, a man who published the first grammar, meaning giving it appropriate laws. Even the language existed already, giving it the laws of grammar and setting it concretely. And so with this technique, they did the same with Nahuatl, the Aztec and Tlaxcalan language, right? And they also did it to Quechua. And they did this before English even had a grammar. I want to say Nahuatl for sure. Quechua, I think, is it might be close to English, but I want to say it's before too. But I think it is before English. And then also Nahuatl was before German as well. And so it's interesting, these native languages were provided grammars by Spanish missionaries way before a lot of European countries were doing so. And just the fact that they were doing it is another, I would say, accomplishment by Catholic missionaries to humanize and to teach the natives, And so a lot of these grammars have served now for their conservations. While a lot of languages are being lost in this modern day quickly, these languages, ironically, are the more protected because of the early work that these Catholic missionaries were doing.
So I was just going to ask Zacharias, on that note, do we know of any sort of conquistadors or Spanish generals at the time that were like reprimanded for mistreatment of the natives, whether it be because they're trying to strip them of their culture? Was there anything back from they were getting back word from Spain that, hey, we got to treat these natives with respect and dignity? Was there anything going on like that?
Sorry for smiling. It's just my lights are going off right now. But yes, there actually was. It actually happened as I said, it's very complex, right? But a lot of these laws that were being established, for the mistreatment of individuals and Native Americans, you have people, you have you almost have an excess of complaints that happen in order to push people politically too. So I'll get your question right away off the back. I can think of a few right here. You have Christopher Columbus is a good example. He had his governorship, stripped, and he was arrested. Imagine the humiliation that is to be arrested and brought there. I knew it was going to happen, but he was humiliated. Here, I'll keep talking. There you go. He was humiliated. He was arrested and brought back in chains to Spain, right? And that's a big deal.
Columbus was brought back to Spain in chains.
Yes, and because of his for torture and tyranny. Those were the charges against him. And so this part of history gets completely omitted. So everyone wants to talk about how bad a guy he was and how Spain funded him, but yet they don't talk about how they were holding him accountable too.
Wow.
Obviously, later on he kind of gets his name cleared up a little bit more, but he definitely is not as rich as he could have been or as great as he could have been if he hadn't been behaving that way and if he hadn't been reprimanded. So
Right.
another one too was Nuño de Guzman. Nuño de Guzman was actually he was very tyrannical. He was a conquistador that was I think he founded Guadalajara, but he ended up going to different places and causing mayhem. And he eventually was arrested and brought back to Spain, and he died in a jail cell in Spain for his behavior.
We kind of see that type of human behavior just naturally. Even like you send your kids off to college and they're away from home, you're going to see behaviors from these children because they're not around these authorities. So I think it makes sense to me on a human behavioral level that these guys, what can one man do with all this power, right? I think Kanye was famous for saying that, right? But
it's true. Yeah. You're always gonna have a bad apple, right? You're always gonna have someone, And for those who think that I want to spread the white legend, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But like they have another one too is okay, so he died in a jail cell in Spain before what he did, right? He was actually political rivals with Hernan Cortes too. People try to call out Hernan Cortes too. He stood up for himself. He held his own. And in fact, people try to take his power in one point too. When he was on his way to Honduras in an expedition, there was a whole coup of Spanish people who tried to do it. So it's interesting. So that's a lot, and you'll start to see that because they knew that the monarchs and the law valued their subjects, the citizens, right, of their empire. They knew that by politically having rhetoric charged with accusations like that guy is bad to natives. No, that guy is bad to natives. You see a lot of back and forth like that sometimes for people who are pushing for power. And so sometimes some people who are not very savvy in history, even historians, they'll take some of these citations and they'll say, oh, see, he's bad. But then it's leaving it completely out of context that this is a game that they're constantly playing on each other. Kind of like today, we have a lot of political rhetoric, which, if taken out of its context, is completely falsified, right? It happens all the time. And so this is kind of what's happening in this time too. And it's not just like Hernan Cortes, but there's other little skirmishes here and there, people debating, getting arguments, just didn't like each other. And there's even people dying in prison jails because of some rhetoric like that, even if it was true or not. Some say that some might have gotten innocently accused and they ended up in jail, right? But so that's another one. It's Nuño de Guzman, who was, tyrannical in that way. But another one of my favorites, right? The people to be misbehaving against native people too, was Gonzalo Pizarro. Gonzalo Pizarro was the brother of Francisco Pizarro, right? The conqueror of Peru, right? What is Peru now? And the Incan Empire. And so there's a couple brothers there that helped in this conquest, and they stayed in power. Gonzalo Pizarro was definitely one of the more hot-headed ones, and there's other incidents where he gets into some trouble. I want to say I wanted to bring it all up into great detail, but he does have kind of uncertain behavior. But what happens is when there's new laws that get applied by King Philip II, I want to say, and I want to say I'm getting this all right, but there are laws that are being. I'll just say this instead of saying King Philip II, I'll say that there are laws being in place for the encomenderos, the people who basically have what some references like plantations nowadays, but they're encomiendas. They're basically places where it's almost like a medieval system where you have serfs and you have the person that provides for you, right? And the people work your land, right? And so basically, he's not following the rules of these new laws that are being in place, or these laws that are supposed to be in place. And so the viceroy, the representative of the king, basically the king's representative, comes to him and says, "Hey, you're misbehaving. This got to stop." And he's calling him out on it. Gonzalo Pizarro, cut off his head. He cut off the viceroy's head, and started a full civil war on that situation. And the troops, the king's troops came down. This is in Peru. This is Peru. So this is in Peru. Peru. And so, but the king's troops get sent to Peru, and they defeat him in the revolt. And he tries to be like his own authority out there. And no, they come down on him and they chop his head off, and they set an example. So a lot of these early conquistadores are, and even Christopher Columbus is a huge example, because these are men of elite power. Like, these are not just some average guy, right?
So basically,
And
you
this
have
is all the 1500s, right? This is not like this is like some of the first, yeah.
So getting into that 300-year span that you call it, I think the golden age of Spain and Mexico. That basically, that looks like just like a lot of building, right? A lot of building, a lot of hospitals, a lot of churches, a lot of towns,
And universities too.
And
universities. Colleges and universities, which are a little different. Colleges and universities. Yeah.
So and during those 300 years of all these golden years that you referenced, what stands out to you as far as I think what I would say is the how do you say this? Like, they were golden. Why? They were golden. Why? Because the systems of monarchies was really good, or because Catholicism was really good. Like, why was it so good in these years?
Well, I want to say the Renaissance, the Golden Age specifically. I want to say it's only referencing like maybe in the peninsula. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure what exactly that is referencing. But what I do know is that there's a lot of art coming out in the 1500s. You have a lot of intelligent people, inventions as well. There's this book I've read called The Empire of Engineers. It's in Spanish, but it's talking about how the Spanish came and they brought different projects, and they may not have been technically engineers, but they made themselves into engineers. Like, you had padres who set up the first Camino Real from Veracruz to Mexico City. And you have, a lot of the roads, and a lot of the, obviously they needed the ships, how they managed the ships and were able to do what other civilizations couldn't do. Obviously, it was a golden age. They were the first to cross the world, make the first trip around the world, in the same time period. It wasn't that they just discovered the Americas, what we call the Americas now, right? They went around the world with El Cano. And so, you think about, and the amount of cities that they built in that time period, like, it was just moving all around everywhere. And so, like, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of science that comes out in this time period as well. But I would say that's obviously Catholic. That's a very Catholic thing. Think about it, because it's interesting, because there was a narrative out there. I don't know how popular it is now, but at some point it was popular, that Protestant culture promotes wealth, right? When in reality, you start to see that actually Catholic societies promote even more wealth. That's why you have the Renaissance of Italy is extremely Catholic, right? You have Leonardo da Vinci's time, and all these individuals in Renaissance Italy, even France, has some of the Renaissance. They're very Catholic, even despite being rivals with Spain. And Spain as well is extremely Catholic in this time, and everyone's, they're just working, they're just moving, and so you actually start to see that quite the opposite happens in Protestant Germany and Protestant Europe. It actually falls into a really bad dark age where they're extremely poor after the Protestant Reformation, where individual princes end up becoming their own popes, right? Or individual Protestant reformers end up becoming their own popes, and they end up acquiring a lot of the land that used to belong to Catholics. But they're not really generating much industry. In fact, Germany, as a wealthy nation, really doesn't become as wealthy as it is until it incorporates Catholic Germany, right? So I don't know if you know, but there's a Catholic Germany, the southern part of Germany, that fought the Protestant part for a long time. And Bavaria, and so all that area actually brings out some of the best engineers for that country once it becomes like a modern state. So that's the list goes on and on. Even our country, even our country, we're not. I mean, we're kind of founded on Masons and Protestants, right? But who's the motor of our greatest moments? There were a lot of Catholics in World War II. From that point, my grandfather was in World War II. Very all Catholic family, all his brothers, all that.
A lot of people don't know this, but like the only Catholic founding father, Charles Carroll, his ties to Catholic France is what really helped fund the Revolutionary War against England at the time. So a lot of his guys.
Well, you know about the Spanish. The Spanish participated in the independence war. You know that, right? The 13
No, I
colonies.
don't.
I think I mean, that's a Catholic. The 13 colonies were even suffering even when France was helping, and Spain intervened and they got involved and they started to they fought in the south against the British, and they took back Florida, which had been acquired by England, because originally it was Spain. Then England came and took it, and then during this time they took the opportunity and they sent a great general named Bernardo de Galvez, who even Thomas Jefferson writes him a letter, and it says, thanks to your empire, we have success. Even Thomas Jefferson said that, and even George Washington as well. We have a letter from him talking about how the Spanish, thanks to the House of Bourbon, meaning that's the king of that time of Spain, thanks to them, that there's going to be very soon they're going to get their independence. And so like there's these huge glaring references of Hispanics helping in these wars, in these battles, like Pensacola, right? And so you even have a descendant of Moctezuma. Obviously, he's mestizo. A descendant of Moctezuma. I want to say his name's Jeronimo. It could be something else.
Geronimo.
Hiron. No, not that Jeron. But I think his name's Hiron something Moctezuma. Hiron. But he fights in the wars too. He fights in those battles too, right? And it's another reflection of the mestizaje, the generations of blending that the Spanish empires had, right? And so. Yes, you know, despite what you hear about the caste system, which is not even, it's not even a real caste system as we think, right? I don't know if you've heard about that before, but there was no enforcement of individuals being placed into locked boxes because of their color of their skin. In fact, the commissioned caste system paintings that we see of the different people being labeled different types of ethnicities because of because of who they mixed with, right? Doesn't come out to the 1700s, and it's an initiative commissioned by what is then Mexico, or that area, and but yet you start to see something interesting in these caste paintings is that you start to see that look at all the variety that they were allowed to do, that they did, that there was no prohibition. In fact, we see the opposite. From 1503, we see Queen Isabel the Catholic saying, Spanish people, marry Indian people, marry Spanish people, and encouraging them to get married. And then it becomes legally, directly, explicitly stated in 1514 in the laws. It says that they should be getting married with each other. So you don't have a racist society purposely looking to marry with other groups of people like this. And why? Because it strengthened the Spanish Empire, creating marriages like this. And so in houses with other houses. And so, but anyways, but I think one more point about this caste system idea. These paintings, right, that you're going to see by other historians, mind you. You'll get responses. What about the caste system? Honestly, there is no, oh, you're a lobo, you can't do this. You're Santa Patras, you can't do this. There's nothing like that. But you start to see that in the caste painting as well. You see wealthy Black women in there. You see poor white men in there. You see aristocratic Native women in there. You see all these different social classes, and they're all different colors. It's all over the place. And so this idea that people were compelled to be subjugated and unable to move because of the color of skin, it's not real. It doesn't exist in the Spanish Empire. You have right away, as I said in the very beginning, the conquest, a lot of these individuals become noble elites. And a lot of these people carried more wealth, more power socially, even in Hispanic society, than some individual, some Joe that's coming off the boat, you know? So but obviously, like you're going to have certain individuals coming from the peninsula who are going to be maybe more tied politically or have more advantage politically, socially, but that doesn't necessarily equate because they're white.
Dang.
So do we have examples of this when Spain reconquered Spain from the Muslims? Like, is there this mixing, and is there this allowing of nobility amongst the Arabic families in Spain?
No, you don't see it as much, and so that's some of the interesting thing, right? I think some people who get, how do I say this in a polite way, sensitive with the things that I say, they're like, well, you know what? Us Mexicans, yeah, okay, maybe we are a product of Spain, but you're a product of Islam, right? They'll say something stupid like that. Obviously not, because we're Catholic, right? But so it's interesting because the many, I would say, Muslims in the territories of what is now Spain, for hundreds of years, they weren't allowed to just marry Christians and intermingle like that. Like someone would have to convert, you know? So, and not only that, but there were Christian kingdoms in the north, like Asturias, that survived the invasions, and also in northern, like north, you know, where there's now France, right? And so you have all these different Christian kingdoms, what eventually pushed back over hundreds of years, and they slowly start pushing back, and they end up maintaining their, I don't know, say like their independence, their independent ways of living, you could say, but they're separate kingdoms that end up sprouting from Asturias. And over time, they push back. So I would say this is how I pronounce it. The Spanish is not a Muslim of origin. It's not Arabic of origin, but it has Arabic influence, right? Which is something different, right? It's kind of like saying Mexico is, I don't know, like a good way to say it. Like Spanish in Mexico, it's not of Mexica origin, it's of Spanish origin, but it does have Mexica influence, right? Like abacate and like coyote. Well, I don't even know if coyote is a word, but there's a bunch of different words that it may have some Nahuatl influence in it. But that's not to say that it's originally from Mexico. It's originally from Spain. It's the influence, kind of like Catholicism, right? Catholicism's originally Catholic, right? It's from, you know, Jesus, but it has influences, right? And that's different in the states of origin. And it's kind of like the idea that, you know, Christmas is pagan and all this is pagan. Like, no, it's Christian, but it has influences, right? So
like basically, what might have been adored or how you say this, understood, like the 3-leaf clover by the Irish. It was something. It was something to them. But then once Jesus takes over the culture through Catholicism, now that 3-leaf clover has a new meaning of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You know, and I see that. And I also see words like ojalá. Like it sounds Arabic when you really think about it, and us Mexicans, we say that, you know, for all kinds of reasons, and that's some of that Arabic influence that you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And I'm sure there are people who got together, and there's, you know, for 700 years you have Muslims in there, and I'm sure we may have some other DNA, you know, and I'm sure it shows up in all the research, you know, and the new testing that comes out and stuff. But the origins of Hispanicity is a concept that's older than that even, right? Because Hispania is the Roman label for the peninsula, the Spanish peninsula, including Portugal too, right? That in Rome, right? So that's a territory of the Roman Empire. And Hispania. So, you know, it goes that, and, you know, and it's not like all those Christian kingdoms were expelled by the Muslims. Like, no, they actually ended up establishing themselves and pushing back. And so, yeah, despite the, you know, the odd mixture here and there, generally speaking, Muslims were not allowed to just be with a Christian.
That's crazy. So I think I mean, what I get from that is those wars were a lot more personal, a lot more anti-Christ. And then when you get to Mexico, you're not necessarily having this anti-Christ pushback from the people. It's more of like a we need to understand you, and when Mother Mary shows up, it kind of brings it all together. And now both.
Well, yeah, and there are wars. There's conquest, right, in the Americas. It's but it's not based on race. It's not based on race. And it's not really based on religion. It's mostly based on aggressive. There are a lot of aggressive nations, you know, that are surrounding these different territories. And there's also the Spanish who are very ambitious too. You have different people who have ambitions, and they're looking for either gold or different things, you know, which is not necessarily a negative take, because that's what people do, right? They spread out, right? They're we are called to evangelize too, right? But we're not necessarily. So there's a lot to it, right? You have times when you have padres walking around, just kind of trying to evangelize certain nations or tribes on their own, and they end up getting murdered, right? Because a lot of times these folks are they're unarmed and they're kind of going on their own, trying to do the right thing. But you start to see as you get into this history, there's a huge respect that comes out. You see a lot of blood from different kinds of missionaries that come out through this time period, and they're trying to do the right thing. It's interesting, But then you start to see why the Spanish have to retaliate too and defend themselves when innocent people get hurt and stuff, when things are not working, and there's a lot of reasons, right? But race and religion was not the primary reason for the conquest in Americas,
Right.
Especially race. It's no more than human race.
Right. So I'm trying to remember the queen's name that sent Cortez.
Isabella? Is it?
Well, I know Isabella is an important queen. She's the one I've been referencing, Isabella Católica. But she was not in charge. She had actually already died by the time Hernan Cortez was there. So he was around the time of her daughter, like Juana, and also her son, Carlos I. That's Charles. That's what I was talking about, Carlos I, or the fifth of Germany. So basically, his role is important. He's a super important emperor. That's the one that they were complaining to back and forth, Bartolomé Casas and all that. So he's a very big important. He's the emperor that's in charge when the Protestant Reformation breaks out. He's the one that funds some of the wars against the Protestants in Germany, because you have to understand, Germany was part of the Spanish Empire when he was in charge, like even before him. Because what happened was that because of marriage,
what capacity?
Yeah, like that. That's why a big part of it, and the Austrias, because the thing is like. It kind of and the Netherlands, right? And what is now like Belgium. I think he was born in Belgium, and Carlos I. So what happens is that Queen Isabella Católica and King Ferdinand El Católico, right? They get together. They're the ones that accomplished the reconquest in 1492. They end up funding Christopher Columbus, who ends up discovering the Americas the same year, 1492, and then that's the same year that Nebrija establishes the first grammar for Spanish. So a lot's happened in that 1492. And then after that, Queen Isabella la Católica, she's really involved in the discoveries, and she's also involved in talking and calling for the Native Americans to be treated as citizens, right? For her, before she dies, and even on her death and her last will, she establishes that for all Native Americans to be justly treated, right? Like that's one of the most key things you'll see in her testament. I want to say it's 1504. And then what happens is her husband's in charge. Her husband's in charge. He's actually the one that ends up under his charge. They end up conquering southern Italy from I want to say they go into some major wars against the French in southern Italy, because I think France is trying to take over southern Italian Spain, right? And so they end up fighting them off with this great warrior named Gonzalo Fernandez. But so he's in charge until I want to say until he's dead. But what happens is there's kind of a bit of a little moment when his grandson, so his daughter Juana, she's not seen fit to, and like a lot of the other kids, I think they died. She's like kind of one of the last ones. They marry her to a nobleman in that comes from like the Austrian, the Holy Roman Empire. He's a descendant of the Holy Roman Empire, so he's got a lot of pull in the north, right? And so like in Austria, that's where his and also Burgundy, right? So he's got like different family links to different houses because of his marriage. He's been kind of set that way. So she ends up marrying this guy named Philip, who is that representative for these different houses. Mind you, that's the Holy Roman Empire, right? Like that's an old lineage. And they get together. Juana and him, Philip, they get together. They have a baby, and that's Charles. So that's when those two, the Holy Roman Empire meets the Spanish Empire, and becomes this great sovereignty, and that's Charles the First. And including the Americas that he's already, that Hernan Cortez conquers, and all the other spots. And under him, they conquer many places. So it ends up becoming extremely big, and that's when the Protestant Reformation kind of breaks out up north, right, in Germany. But that was all Catholic. So that's how the cross de Borgoña, la Cruz de Borgoña, la Cruz de Borgoña, it comes from that side, the Austrian, and that's when it becomes adopted as the Spanish Empire's flag, the cross of St. Andrew. And so because that was their patron saint for the Burgundy house, who was just one house of that child who also shared the other house of the Holy Roman Empire, right? So he had kind of crossed that way. So So this all kind of gets joined in this marriage. And then continuing on, they call the Habsburg family, which is the after goes on for a bit. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. And so
I'm talking to you, man. Thank you very much.
No. It's good. It's good. This is something that I want to watch back and really use in my witness when I'm explaining the faith in regards, because somehow, obviously, it's not disconnected. It's the two events, or the two things in question are very connected, right? Where the gospel of Jesus Christ has not reached the shores of this Mexican land until Spain arrives there. So there's some objectively good things happening. And obviously we have humans kind of managing this process, and humans are imperfect. So we're gonna have these different situations. And then we have this 300-year period before the 1800s, or even up until the mid 1800s. Where we see that strength and that progression of the Spanish influence, whether sometimes it's officially politically or religious or whatever it might be, or linguistic or whatever. And up until sometime in the 1800s, that begins to crumble. And there's some form of independence, Mexico independence from Spain.
Yes. And so I like to, real quick. So Spain, the Spanish Empire, I won't even say Spain, but the Spanish Empire is the only global potency that united all of us. So like what is now Northern Mexico, as I said before, is totally different types of natives, right? But the Spanish Empire, with their native conquistadors, conquered all this. And that's why you'll see certain places called Nahuatl names that are far from that Mesoamerican area, because of some of these Tlaxcalans that settled there and established these areas, right? So you have to understand, like, this is important because we're talking about conquest, and with conquest comes also unity too, right? So it unified the only power to unify these areas, right? All the way to the Philippines, to California, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, even some parts of Alaska, what do you call it? All the way down South America, all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so what you have here, you have kind of because it's one empire, they're working in a similar wavelength, and so they're building different things. They know who's going where, and who's in charge of what. Obviously, nothing's perfect. Life's not perfect now, And I think I wanted to say that at the very beginning, that let's free with complexes for us Catholics and Hispanics. It's okay to be Catholic, But the reason being is because you start to see some of the other examples, like Protestants, obviously, and don't even get me started on atheists who've killed more people in the 20s, in the 1900s with communism, So they're the last ones to give me a moral lesson. And so they're the first ones that talk. It's so funny to me,
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. All those accusations they give, they're just a cop-out to have a real discussion on philosophy, theology, and anything else important. But this is a cop-out. But anyways, that's just my last thing I want to say that. But I want to get back to the independences. So the independences, what you see, what happens is, no matter how well-intentioned you want to make it believe, you want to believe it to be, even let's say you think it's like a liberating movement, right? It's liberating you from a tyrannical empire. The reality is that's not it, obviously. But the reality is that you're breaking and you're dividing and you're making vulnerable what was strong. What was strong was bigger, and now you're making it smaller and you're making it weaker to foreign interests and political and cultural rivals, right? And religious rivals too. Think about it. So what happens is that you have Mexico, for example, who ends up breaking up into, because it's such an important territory. New Spain is not Mexico. New Spain is such an important territory that a lot of individuals are not sure what to make of what's happening with Napoleon, who's invading the peninsula where the king is. And the Napoleon ends up becoming friends with the Spanish king at that time and ends up taking him into France. And so a lot of people are in panic in the peninsula and in Hispanic America, and they're not sure what's going on. And so they're freaking out. And you're having different fractions of royalists, right? People who are fighting for the crown and fighting for the interest of Catholics and Spanish people, and they're thinking, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. And like Miguel Hidalgo too. It's even said that he said that yeah, he was fighting for, like, he had to use the name of king of the king, or else his dog wouldn't even follow him. You know, somebody said that. It was so funny. But it's interesting because you start to see that all these different royalists are even fighting against each other. People fighting for the crown are even fighting against each other. And this, what it is really is just civil war. And it's civil war, and you have individuals fighting for political interests, individual interests. And so eventually, when the Constitution gets established, it's not even that like anti-Spanish. You know, it's not like death to the gabachos or some shit like that we hear online. You know, nothing like that. In fact, it's actually requiring people to be Catholics. It's actually having a general understanding of their Hispanicity, right? Like, it's pretty solid, right? And I think Agustin Iturbide, I want to say, yeah, like he eventually gets killed, and then after that, you have different people kind of taking power over each other. You know, that one emperor gets killed, and then you have Benito Juarez, who ends up becoming the first president, right? And interestingly enough, some of these early leaders, like, they end up getting influenced by the United States too, and the United States ends up, now it's a totally different playing field, because you have Mexico, which is now a Mexican country, its own country, but it's not the Spanish Empire. And now the United States feels brave enough to invade it and conquer it. Right. When it's separate, once it's only lasted, I want to say, like all the North Southwest we have, it only lasted like 29 years, I want to say, until the Mexican-American War, right? I'm not sure how long exactly. I should just stop dropping numbers, but it's a few decades. It's not, and mind you, it was hundreds of years, right, with the Spanish Empire. So it couldn't even last that long. And so they end up getting all the way invaded, all the way deep. And I think the United States eventually decides not to take over Mexico and just has Mexico as a separate country. And they end up taking, like 50%. And so, but that's something that they would have done.
Real quick, and maybe you can confirm this is true, but I heard that during or after the Mexican-American War, that I think it was President Polk here in America, that he had the opportunity to take Mexico up to the Efe, but he declined because at the time he didn't want to have to make more Mexicans American citizens, like give them citizenship essentially.
I've heard that too. I'll have to verify with that too, because it did sound. That's the same thing. I just that's the point, that they did have the opportunity. I don't know why exactly. You know, maybe that's probably what it is. But I don't know
if you would know. But okay, sorry.
But yeah, no, you're right though. They did have the opportunity. They beat Mexico, and so it threw Mexico into all that war. Imagine Civil War, and then that war. Not to mention the wars with Indians that they had to. Like Geronimo, right? He was fighting Mexico, right? He was fighting Spain. So, and then eventually, I think the United States takes over that area. But like, this war impoverishes what is now Mexico. And from then on, they've been in many different wars since, like the Revolutionary War, which happens much later, and war, it hurts the economy. People can't create as much. They don't create as much industry. You can't create as much, right? When you got war, it sets you back. So as I explained before, New Spain was not at war, right? Hispanic America was not at war with itself. And then all of a sudden, when you see these different countries sprout out because of the independences, they end up getting into many civil wars throughout Hispanic America, all over the place. And so much violence, so much death, it impoverishes what is now Hispanic America. Because what you have is the fall of a classical empire. Like any fall of a classical empire, you're going to have impoverishment, just like the Roman Empire, just like, that's kind of what happens. But now is an opportunity with the information on the internet, without complexes, to come back together. And even now with Trump in charge, like, now Hispanic America can maybe pay attention and reach out and talk to other Hispanic American countries instead of demonizing Spain and demonizing their history and their origins. Maybe they can look at themselves, take a good deep look at themselves, and take care of business. Because the things that I hear from some of these political leaders is for the circus, and it's interesting to me. I'm like, how are you pointing fingers? How are you talking shit? You have things you have to work on, And I want these countries, I want Hispanic America to be strong, and I know it can be strong if they begin to share resources. They share a religion. They share, generally speaking, they share a language and a religion. It's silly to me that they're broken up to over 21 countries. So yeah, I think it's time. It's probably going to be time for them to start picking things up, and if whether that comes through Bukele or Central America first, we'll see what happens. But but yeah.
But it sounds like these Hispanic countries, whether it be El Salvador or Nicaragua or Mexico, it sounds like they're more interested in nationalism and achieving something and achieving something like America achieved.
That's probably because of their separation from their Spanish roots, based on what I'm, you know what I mean? Like
right.
they're always going to have that,
right? And I think what I kind of seen as a trend there, Zacharias, is especially looking at Nicaragua right now. They have a very anti-Catholic government.
Yeah, totally, man. It's crazy. That was crazy.
Yeah, I heard they're kicking out the nuns.
Yeah, they're crazy. That guy's crazy.
I'm sure he knows.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But that's what I'm saying. Like with everything comes opportunity, right? So, it's sad, but I think it's time for. This is a new page, right? It's interesting, but yeah, that's why I see a lot of these independents. So I haven't even gotten into Simon Bolivar, bro. Like the independence in South America, it really fucked it up. Simon Bolivar was, how Spain, the Spanish Empire, intervened for the 13 colonies. Mm-hmm. Well, the British intervened and they helped Simon Bolivar get independence from Spain, from the Spanish Empire. And so they actually funded him. They threw Colombia into debt before he was even a country by taking money from them. They also sent troops to fight against the Spanish. So you're telling me this Hispanic man who's been accused of being a Mason, I can't verify that yet or not, but who has been hanging out at least with Masons, has been breaking up the Spanish Empire, fighting his civil wars against his own people. And it's interesting because now they treat him like a demagogue out there, and they treat him like an idol in Colombia and Venezuela. Like there's literally laws in Venezuela we cannot talk bad about Simon Bolivar. There's not even laws like that for Jesus Christ. Yes, you can even say what you want against Jesus Christ, but you say something against Simon Bolivar, you could be legally responsible for something. That's how much esteem they have him in. Simon Bolivar, but what he did is he hurt Hispanic America, and great. So I don't know if you know, but but principally, mainly Colombia and Venezuela, and well, I don't know if you know, but Panama, what is now Panama, and Colombia was the same country. It was all one. With Venezuela too. Well, guess what? After the independence, right? He even you could see some of his writing. He even regretted some of the stuff he did. He's like, dang, like he talked about how they're in debt. They talk about how things are not looking good. He was also speaking racist things against Native people and Black people. And it's interesting because when you see Venezuela ends up separating from Colombia almost immediately. So it was going to be the Great Colombia, but ends up separating from Colombia. And then later on, the United States gets involved with interventionism, and they support the Panamanian side, which gets into one of the worst civil wars South America's had. And they end up fighting against their own brothers, what is now Colombia, right? And they end up splitting ways and becoming another country. And it's like now these different little countries are completely vulnerable to all this different foreign interventionism since these independences, right? So that's why I see a lot of these independences as self-interested and kind of like Protestant reform, like the Protestant Reformation for Christianity. It just split it and made it vulnerable into different little factions.
What do you say? What do you say to this this comment of Texas defeated Mexico? The U.S. didn't need to wait for Spain to move out.
No, I would check that timeline because I think Texas comes in after. Afterwards.
That timeline's off, Dirk.
I know people like to romanticize things, but you should look at the time because I think Mexico gets independence before Texas.
Right. So okay. So Mexican independence is around what year?
1821.
1821, and we have when did the first Mason lodges come into Mexico?
I wanted to ask him about that. If with
the 1700s, I think.
The 1700s,
the early 1700s,
or
early, I want to say.
Mason lodges and where?
in Mexico.
Oh, in Mexico. Oh, I don't know about that in Mexico.
Yeah, I think
in
it happened. If my memory serves me correctly, I think it happened in the 1800s. 1806. The first Mason Lodge of Mexico.
Scottish, right?
The year 1813 saw the creation of the first Grand Lodge of Mexico, a Scottish rite. So
I wanted to ask him about that. Benito Juarez was a Mason and all that. That's what I've heard. I don't know how true that is, but go ahead.
Yeah. So Juanito Juarez,
Benito Juarez, the first president.
Benito Juarez.
Yeah.
And that's a bit later too, because like even though I think Mexico got independence, he didn't become president until a little bit later, because there was kind of some turmoil. There's turmoil in leadership before he finally settles in.
Right. So I see, that's what I'm paying attention to, right? Is these timelines. And so we have these Masons establish the lodge in the 1800s, and then we have I'm sorry, it looks like we have bad connection.
I can hear you, but yeah.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay, cool. So we have the lodge in the 1800s. Then we have Mexican independence literally happen a couple decades later, and to me that's no coincidence, and that leads me to so the Mexican independence, and then the first president, and then boom, literally a decade or two after that, you have the Mexican president that was a Mason that declared the war, the what we know it as the Cristero War, but he declared a war against the Catholic Church, or was it more broad than that? Do you know the history there?
No. The Cristero War. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you said was great. He was a Mason. He did persecute Catholics and sent federal troops to different places, even especially native places that were very Catholic, right? Wiped them out. But no, in regards to the Mason lodges, I'm not entirely sure when it started in Mexico. But like if you said 1806 or 1813, is that what you said? The first Mason lodges in Mexico?
Correct.
Yeah.
1806, 1813 was the first master lodge.
Well, and I think the fighting, the independence civil wars, I was telling you, remember the civil wars, even though 1821 is when independence happened, right? But it was actually, they were fighting for like 10 years though. I think it started when Miguel Hidalgo did the grito, and that wasn't, I think it was like 1810 or 1811. So, it started like, it was a long, imagine 10 wars of killing each other, right? So until they finally settled down. So that's a long time for civil war. So whatever the Mason, you said Mason lodges, if there happened to be funding, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me too much, but I would like to follow a paper trail before saying too much. But always Masons, I think Masons they don't like Catholics, and Catholics it's prohibited from becoming Masons. Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons for that.
Right. Okay, so that Cristero War, you see, this helped me make sense of this, right? Where you just said that from the fall of an empire, you're going to see poverty, you're going to see some of this chaos, and then you take that a little bit further from the empire falling, and you take it a little bit further, and there's an actual attack against the Catholic Christian institution. And to me, I'm not surprised why, for example, we see such a beautiful land like Mexico, and you see things that don't match up with that beauty, right? Like you see these cartels, you see this corruption of government, and you hear about it. And although I think a lot of those things can be exaggerated and over sensualized, I think it's there. And if I'm comparing and contrasting the old Mexican stories from those 300 years, we're looking at a major difference in Mexico. From before the fall of the empire to after these attacks in the 1920s. And those are our grandparents. They were born into that time. So we're children of were their great grandchildren or grandchildren, and so now it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that a lot of Mexico is not well catechized. It makes sense to me that these cartels or this level of corruption is so well known to Mexico. What is that? What you have found in your dive into these histories?
Well, yeah. I mean, the impoverishment, right? Impoverishment bred corruption, and yeah. And my point is that impoverishment didn't start at the conquest. You know, it happens after the fall of the Spanish Empire, because we see Mexico City, as I mentioned before, was as important as London or Paris in the turn of the 1800s. And that's something that even Alex von Humboldt states, who was a rival of Hispanicity, but he even admits it. And he even admits the high wages that miners are making too in that time. So yeah, absolutely. And it's not just him, but you see a lot of the industry in that time, that's just it's just very interesting. When you start to dive into I'll say the lifestyle, you see kind of like the richness, right? Doesn't look like now, but it's for its time, it's extremely rich. And the cattle industry was brought here, established by the Spanish. Wherever the Spanish were, you see a heavy cowboy culture all throughout Hispanic American, what is now the Southwest. And so, yeah, they were the first cowboys. And yeah, so that, before we had plastics, and before furniture, everything was made out of leather, clothes, armor, everything, parts of houses, and yeah, and then the meat, not to mention the meat that's taken from it, the milk, everything, all this didn't exist before. So yeah, you have hundreds of years of establishing this lifestyle, and it's becomes at one point where you can buy a lot of meat for very little, right? In certain places like Mexico City. But yeah, wow. The impoverishment after the fall.
Right. And just thinking about 1920, to me, that's very near to that 1820 date. And mm-hmm. so to me, that's kind of helped me. Right. I guess it's helped me get closer to that time and realize that how you say this, instead of looking at our situation right now without all that history, looking at it with that history is what makes sense. Yeah. Finally,
I think once we start taking pride in our culture, and I think that'll be a great step in the right direction, right? Even if I say we, that's generously saying it, but Hispanic America needs to take pride in its Hispanicity and start building its infrastructure and rooting out its own corruption and start linking with its brothers and sisters from other places, because these countries are kind of artificial. For example, Guatemala has some of the same natives as southern Mexico, but yet they get shitted on all the time. It's interesting to me, but yet it's like, in reality is, yeah, we may, have a different nationality, but we're more similar, way more similar than we are different. So, going back to the Mason thing, one thing you might find interesting is that I don't know if you know about the history of the Philippines at all. Like, also in my opinion, there's Hispanics. A lot of them are, even if they don't even recognize themselves as that. They were a part of the Spanish Empire for 300 years. Very important ports for for when they were doing business with China, right? The Spanish Empire.
That's new to me. But I recently learned it. Maybe I think literally probably 3-4 weeks ago or something like that. But no, I didn't know that the Philippines.
So that like the Spanish came and conquered the Philippines, because here's interesting. Obviously, kind of like Mexico, the Philippines that we know now, there was no Philippines. These were islands. And they all had different languages and different customs, different people on the islands. And there's still, if you see the geography of the Philippines, it's erratic. It's like a bunch of different places, and they still have different languages. But the Spanish were the ones to unite these territories, and they gave the name Philippines after King Philip II, the one that established the new laws, right, in the 1500s. But a lot of who conquered the Philippines were not just Spanish from Europe, right? That's what kind of our mind goes to, but there were a lot of more Tlaxcalan Native Americans. And so a lot of Filipinos may look really Mexican, not just because of the Spanish ancestry that they have, but also the Tlaxcalan Native American ancestry that helped in the conquest of these territories, right? And so, yeah, and they established the first ongoing university in Asia, which is the University of Manila, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Nice. L.A. Hodges ask, why do you think Hispanics alive now hold on to that grudge and not embrace the good in their Spanish culture?
Protestant.
We're told that they were the worst of the worst, that our Spanish ancestry are the worst of the worst, that they were genocidal, that we should be ashamed of it. That's why Hispanics they're living with, some of them are living with complexes. But I think it's getting much better now, and it's becoming this. We just need to have these discussions, right? You have the Spanish Black legend that has been distorting our history for hundreds of years. So now we live in a globalized world that's primarily English speaking, and not just that English speakers are bad. That's not the case. No, it's that English history that has been taught for hundreds of years, primarily Protestant, right? Up until very recently. And so a lot of that information that we're given has been misconstrued, exaggerated, or just lies. As we can, as we mentioned from the museums that we see, like how brash that is in plain sight,
Right.
You see some books written that are just like outlandish. So, but yeah, that's what it is. They're living with a false idea of their history and their identity. And here's the thing, and with countries like Mexico and all these independent countries, these republics, they utilize the Black legend because it justifies their existence. So they have no problem carrying it too. And I hear individuals like Maduro talks crazy ass Maduro in Venezuela. He talks hell shit about the Spanish Empire. Mexico's presidents, the two have been talking shit about the Spanish Empire. I don't know why, because mind you, they got their own issues to worry about. That's the least of the problem. But then so yeah, there's some here and there. It's alive and yeah.
Well, and it almost seems how you say this, like how is this information so widely spread out or so popular to be taught? I almost want to blame the United States education system. You know what I mean? And is that accurate to say that? And it doesn't seem like this United States education system is it's almost like it's obviously Protestant, but like not really. It's almost I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, because like it's not in the left or the right. It's kind of like Catholicism, right? It finds itself parallel with Catholicism, Hispanicity, or Hispanic history, and that's why it's been demonized, because it's been one of the most loyal potencies for Catholicism is our Hispanic heritage. So like they're one of the biggest populations of Catholics. You have to understand that if the West is going to propel, it will be with Hispanics, whether in the United States and Hispanic America, who have some of the biggest populations and youth on our side, more than any other group, and we suffer from less identity crisis from other groups, especially here in the United States. So I feel that the United States, even as you said, like the United States history is, abysmal when it's talking about Hispanic Catholic history. It's abysmal, right? We get blamed for things that they themselves do themselves, right? They accuse others of what they are guilty of doing. And it's interesting because, like in California is a good example, right? Like the California missions get all the shit, but yet no one talks about they don't know much about the genocide that happened in California by the United States California government, right? That's why there are no more natives that got wiped out. In Hispanic America, you don't see the same. You see a more mestizaje. You see big populations of native groups still to this day. So, like to try to equate the two, or try to suggest that the Spanish preceding the English speakers somehow participated or encouraged this is completely off. And I've seen historians try to talk like that. It's so interesting to me. I'm like, okay, but what about the examples where they had missions all throughout Hispanic America and they didn't wipe out? They're natives. I'm like half native.
Like you said.
Exactly. So like, that was never the intention. But even including that, let's give him that the United States history on Hispanic history is abysmal. Let's give him that it is, right. But I don't even feel like I'm trying to make WASPs feel guilty, like guilty, right? You should, like, like how some people online are trying to do, right? I think we're kind of need to move beyond that at some point where we're saying, hey, we're neighbors. We believe in many of the same things too, and there's a bigger beast out there like wokeism and Islam that need to be confronted and face first, because these are other forces that are completely alien to us. And so I think we should be, and this is, I think at the end of the day, yeah, like they made more wrongs than us, right? Historically speaking, right? But they today are not the same day from the past. The WASPs now are not the same people from then, and so I don't know. We just got to start living with less complexes, right? And just kind of be strong.
That's dope. For me, how I started embracing my Hispanidad was I went to prison, man. I was in the Arizona State prison, and inside of these prisons, you have this huge push for, we call them Mexica 3000s, right? And it's these guys, these Mexican guys who are basically saying, F Spain, they force converted us, and our real religion, our real culture is Aztec, and inside of these penitentiaries, that's really pushed. You know what I mean? And what I see right there in common is this hate for Christ. This hate for goodness. These are criminals, right? These are criminals, and they're embracing this Aztec thing, these Aztec rituals, this anti-Spanish thing. And I just remember thinking, so you want me to hate part of myself? I couldn't buy that. You get what I'm saying? I couldn't see myself saying, well, to hell with the Spain part of me, because guess what? Like, dude, I appreciate the Spain parts of me, whether it's my physical attributes of being hairy, you know what I mean? Or my language. I love my language. I love my culture. I love what Mexico became because of Spain. So that was my beginning journey in this. And this is really why I wanted to bring you on here to have this conversation, so people, Hispanic people, Mexican people, and Catholic people can really know that they have a place to actually take pride from. You know what I mean? If we can take pride in being Americans, then and Americans, on a government level, on a personal level, on a cultural level, there's been many negative things that come from America, right? Like it's a known thing. If you're an immigrant and you move here, whether you're from Mexico or you're from an Arab nation or something, it's like basically, once you move here and your kids become Americanized, they actually become a little bit more corrupt, a little bit more rebellious. So these are the things that are coming from American cultures, and I'm not saying that that's all of American culture. There's American culture, I got an American flag tatted on me, you know what I mean? And so there's American culture that's great, you know what I mean? I'm gonna get the Mexican one next. Get that
one next right there.
Yeah, that's what I need to get right there, straight up. But you get what I'm saying. I think it's valuable for us to look at this accurately. And to say this statement, I want to ask you this last question before we get off of here. Are you gonna talk about this one? Or no, tell him.
Dirk, my friend Dirk's upset.
Yeah, I think we have this
so Dirk
in our chat. Is
he Protestant? He's not Protestant. Is he Protestant?
He sounds like a Protestant, but he
maybe he's Maybe he's getting the wrong idea, because I see that he's talking about the Mayans and the Aztecs.
Yeah.
And hold on a second. Which I was absolutely just shitting on them in a second ago. So he probably should watch the whole thing. Because I am not ripping Aztec or Mayan, nothing. You're talking to the wrong dude, man. No. So yeah, no. And I was talking about more wrongs, not more than the Aztecs, not more than Mayans. I was talking, not even in comparison to natives, because like you said, the Aztecs, the Mayans were, they're pretty brutal. They're very brutal, and also like the Mayans were got caught sacrificing little kids, and so and that's why Diego de Landa started burning their codexes and started to respond, and then also the Aztecs, obviously, as I talked earlier, there's human sacrifices, and and then the Caribbean, the Caribs were cannibalizing a lot. So I was talking about the wrongs, more wrongs than the Spanish Empire, because mind you, the first governor of California, Dirk, what he said was that a war of extermination will continue until the Indian race is exterminated. And yet you have California mission father, the father of California, the founding father of California, who said, if the Indians should kill me, whether Gentile or Christian, they should be forgiven. So you see the different attitudes here? And you see and not to mention that the attitude of the first governor of California, it continued even through Stanford, who continued with the wars in Mendocino County here in California, and they wiped out the Native American population over here. So that's what I'm talking about. And these were mostly Protestant, even led by Masons as well, where we have Mason cemeteries in Sacramento here. So that's what I'm talking about. And then that's compared to the Spanish Empire's legal integration of Native Americans here, and the first laws protecting Native Americans come from the Spanish Empire, through reference the laws of the Indies and the laws of Burgos, so et cetera, for hundreds of years, all the way until the 1800s. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not defending Aztecs, and I'm not defending Mayans. You should probably know who you're talking to before you start trying to accuse me of things you don't know anything about.
What you said? What California governor said that they wouldn't stop until and I'm probably getting the quote wrong. What was the quote, and what California governor?
So that's the state. That is the state of the state address. So like the state, as in like, it's kind of complicated because there's a state, like how the state of the state, California state, is doing. So it's the address, it's a discourse. And basically he wrote it on 1851. So California, I want to say, became part of the United States in 1848. And then 1849, you have many groups of people coming from the East who are from different parts of Europe even, and other parts from like New York and all kinds of places, right? And, other parts of the world, because of the gold rush that starts to happen. And so Peter Burnett becomes the first governor of California, and there was automatically a big tension with some of the natives that were in the area. And so they started to, they started a war of races, a race war on the Native Americans here in California. And so, it was throughout all the end of the 1800s, all the way till like the 1920s, until Native Americans could be seen as citizens. I want to say 1920s, I could be wrong. But it was, they mostly got wiped out in the late 1800s. So you're talking like 1850s through 1890s. There's just different skirmishes in different places. And California is really big, by the way. So Peter Burnett, he's actually from, I want to say he's from Tennessee. He was a slave owner from Tennessee. He gets a political career. And first he comes over here through Oregon. He arrives, and then, which is not California, but then he dips down into California, and he gets a political career, and he becomes the first governor of California. And that's when he starts to just say what everyone else is feeling, the other Americans are feeling at the time. He even complains about translating everything into Spanish, and because that was part of the deal of making the United States part of all the Southwest part of the United States is to make everything bilingual. He started to get mad about it. He says, we shouldn't do that. So what are we going to do? Translate everything? We have people from like German places and all this. We're going to translate everything. He's complaining about it, And then he says, his most biggest gripe was toward the Native Americans, and just like many other natives of the Americans of that time. And so the natives end up going to, he ends up saying more stuff in that state of the state address. He says that like a husband and wife that can't get along together, that they should divorce. He says so the races should divorce. The Indian race and the white man should divorce. He says an Indian guy does not have the power to be a witness to defend himself in court, even if it's against the white man. And then he says that basically, yes, we're gonna continue this war of races until the Indian race is extinct. And so, yeah, he kind of, he was a logical dude. Like if you read his stuff, he's a smart guy, but he's obviously doing it for the wrong reasons, And so this is something that just continues. He's just the first governor, right? And there's other things like Stanford, the famous school over here, the creator of the university over here. Yeah, he had racist things to say about Chinese people and people of color, and that so there's a lot. It's just a lot, and you just see there's so many chronicles of different things that happened. So they just wiped out some group here in the nighttime, women and children. They came in just blasting and it's totally different. So. Yeah, anyways, it's a dark part, but it just has to be talked about, like if we're just comparing,
Right.
But it's not to make people feel bad now, right? It's not like it's the WASPs now who did that, right? But it's just comparing the history, right?
Right.
But,
and what I've kind of observed, I've been to a couple missions, right? And recently I went to the Tucson mission of San Francisco de Bac. And it was the first Christian church here in Arizona, literally, like of any denomination. And and I think that was the 1600s. San Xavier de Bac.
He's from California, so sorry.
So
do you know about Juan de Oñate? Juan de Oñate, you know about him? Juan de Oñate, you know about the conquistador? So I thought you guys were from New Mexico. My bad. I even said on my Instagram that you guys are from New Mexico. You guys are from Arizona?
Arizona, man.
I'm originally from California, bro. I was born.
Jesus.
I was born in Santa Barbara and
my language.
Dog,
I thought you were from New Mexico. Wow, wonderful. Look, see, you're talking to a knucklehead. What do I know? I shouldn't be on here with you fine gentlemen. Dang. But no. Juan Doñate, that's a whole other story, bro. It's incredible. It's an interesting story. And controversial too. But anyways, yeah, go on.
I was gonna say what I noticed at these missions is you have the natives there. Like if you walk into San Xavier del Bac, the natives are there selling food, tending their workers in the Christian in the Catholic mission. They're giving tours. They're literally, it's almost like that story falls as soon as you see that. As soon as you see these Indians who are Catholic Christians, and they're literally still to this day on reservation land, till this day giving tours to this Catholic mission in a positive, willing way. I think that's evidence enough for me to really see that story wasn't what they told us.
Well, it's interesting, because some natives are not like that over here in California, for example. Some of them are they've been lied to a lot, so they have extreme contempt for the California missions here. So I don't take all their words seriously. You gotta realize, see what they're saying, But the natives in Arizona are a bit different, and I heard this from Jose Lopez Linares that apparently Arizona is one of the last states to become majority white, I want to say, and so I think that might have something to play with it. And not that I care, right? Like I'm not like out here trying to hate white people. Again, no, that's not the case. But the history is that they probably have more of an identity, those natives over there, than the natives over here, right? And so a lot of what they had is lost over here. So they're kind of picking up the pieces from what other English people have been telling them for a while now, right? Like other people who may be enemies of the Catholic Church. So it's interesting, I met a descendant of a California mission here in San Francisco, and Ohlone, right? It's funny to me there's reasons why I think it's funny, but this guy he loves Junípero Serra. He helped in the canonization of Junípero Serra, but he was expressing extreme discontent for everything, like the California missions after he died. And I was like, man, my dude, like how he just went from 100 to 0 to 100, like you could tell there's a lot of conflict in his thought process, like, and when reviewing what he actually said, a lot of he said, was actually not correct. And so, I even went to like the history, and I was like, okay, what did he say here? said this is not quite correct. This is not quite correct. Well, okay, so he obviously has a lot of voices in his head from maybe the native communities that he belongs to, or maybe some of the other scholars, that he's heard from. But to be absolutely honest with you, this is why this work is so important, this translative work, because we're honestly getting a lot of this history from who knows where. So we have to go to the primary sources because the Spanish Empire left so much written documentation regarding this time period. In fact, it was said that they carried pen and ink just like they had weapons on them. That's how important was it for them to write everything down that was happening. It's just a matter of us going into the basement and reading it.
Right.
That's amazing, brother. So just for everybody watching, if you want to learn more about these topics and you want to see both on Instagram and YouTube, Hispanidad Translations, our brother Zacharias right here is doing amazing work when it comes to this. And that's why we got him on the show today. Thank you so much, Zacharias. I also, before we go, I wanted to ask you one question. And considering that this history has been so important to you, do you have a son?
I have a daughter. She's 8 years old.
Okay. And say, for example, you were about to leave, and you might not return. It's something that's serious. What do you think you would tell your daughter if you had a moment to tell her something before you go that would be so important to how she would see the world after that? What would be that thing that you kind of help her look at to I guess grow properly and see things accurately? What would be that last moment statement?
Oh yeah, I'd always say be faithful to Mother Church, Catholic Church. Obviously, of course, Jesus first, right? Jesus before everything, but they stay faithful to the Catholic Church. It'll bring you Jesus. And stay close to our Mother Mary, and stay close to your family. Take care of your family. I think those are, but they all go hand in hand.
Wow,
that's amazing, bro.
Amazing.
Heck yes, brother. God bless you, bro.
Yeah,
God bless you, man. And we'll
Yeah.
cut this up and publish some things, man. And we look forward to continuing talking with you. And as I go through this Conquest of Darkness with Our Lady of Guadalupe, I'm sure there's going to be some more things that we can talk about. So I look forward to having those conversations with you, brother. God, thank you so much, and God bless you, man.
God bless you, Adrian. God bless you, Modesto. I'll see you guys later.
Appreciate it.
Peace.
Take it easy.
Call him real quick. Let's see.
You forgot the time?
Yeah.